The average solo GP is dead. Being handcuffed to a practice that only makes money while you're drilling crushes your freedom. Being trapped at the office is no way to experience life. And doing more fillings and crowns ain't the answer to freedom. Stop it. Freedom comes when your practice makes money without you. Freedom is choosing how many days and how you dental. Ready to forge your freedom? Then keep listening to become a super GP and super CEO. This is the Titanium Practice Podcast with your host, Dr. Stephen Freeman. Let's go.
Hello, all you beautiful people, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Titanium Practice Podcast. I am your host and personal freedom coach, Dr. Stephen Freeman. Thanks for joining me again here today. And this might be a little bit of a longer one, which kind of thinks about long-term thinking and longevity. And we'll see if I end up turning this into two podcasts or not and splitting it up. But let's see what we've got when we start to talk about long-term thinking. And two of them that I start out with thinking is like back around 2012. For some of you may recall the fact like people were freaking out that they thought that the world was going to end in December of 2012. I think it was December 21st, 2012 to be exact, because the Mayan calendar stopped. Like that was the end of the Mayan calendar. And the Mayan calendar was a calendar that lasted 5,125 years long and started back in 3000 something BC. You can do the math, figure it out if you want. But I was like, that's crazy to think. Like, think about our calendars. Our calendars last a year. And we know that it's going to reset and there's really no end to it. You always know, hey, next year you're going to get another, cat calendar that says, hang in there, baby, or something along those lines. But you just know that it's going to keep going. But they thought about time over the course of millennia versus thinking about it over the course of a year. And it's a totally different mindset to be thinking about things long term versus thinking about things over the course of what do I need to do this morning? What do I need to do during the course of the day, week, month, year? And another, we'll call it a clock. It is a clock that Jeff Bezos, fairly famous guy, you've probably heard of him. He is building a clock out in Texas. He's going to spend $42 million on a clock, which is more expensive than my Rolex. But at the same time, it's pretty damn expensive at $42 million to be building a clock. But what it's supposed to do is tell time over the course of 10,000 years. So roughly twice what the Mayans were thinking about. But over the course of that time, your thought process, what you're trying to accomplish over a long period of time, just has a completely different mindset than kind of I mentioned as that day-to-day thing. And Bezos did this. It actually wasn't his idea. He took it from some other guy, the idea of thinking about long-term thinking for people, for humanity, just to kind of change the calculus of how we go about doing things. Because often we will do things in the moment and we won't be thinking about the long-term consequences, the long-term strategy behind what it is that we're trying to do. When I decided to build a very large building, I said to myself, I want to own real estate that, as I've mentioned before, acts as like an annuity for me. That I know I've got guaranteed income, and a lot of it too, from that building after I have sold the practice, or if I hold on to the practice, it doesn't matter. But I've got a huge chunk of money coming in the rest of my life. I don't have to worry about it once that building is paid off, which we're getting close to paying it off, which is awesome. That money will just come in perpetuity Just come on in. Mailbox money is the best money out there that you can possibly have. And so that was my long-term thought process behind it. So when I started thinking about building that building, it was about 10 years ago. And there was planning that went into that building. There was, action to actually get it built. And then there's the process of actually having a business successful enough to pay the bill for that building. So those are all decisions that you're having to make along the way, and having to think about those things is very different than saying, what am I going to have for lunch today? But I knew that I wanted to make sure that regardless of what happened for the sale of the practice, that I knew that I was going to have a building. I knew I was going to have income. It's a built-in retirement account all by itself, and it's much cooler than a 401k. I mean, it just is. And I don't have to worry about whether the market goes up and down. I know exactly how much rent I'm going to get for that thing for the rest of my life. And what we'll get into is we'll talk about, at some point in time, your freedom number. What number do you need in order to retire, to get out of all of this? So most of what Titanium Practice focuses on is about freedom. And freedom doesn't need to just be money, can be also time, but really it's the concentration of the two of them together that truly gives you freedom. When you have the money to do what you want and the time to do what you want, that is freedom. And so we're always needing to be moving in that direction and thinking in that direction of how do we get to the point where we have the time and the money to do whatever it is that we want to be doing at any given moment of any given day. That needs to be the thought process. That needs to be the dominating thought process in your brain on that daily, that monthly, that weekly, the yearly, decadely. I don't even know that's a word, don't care. But you need to be thinking along those lines. So at some point in time, you need to sit down and think about, what do you want your long-term future to look like? Do you want to just work a day a week and have a small practice that's really easy to manage with like one lady up front, one assistant in the back, and that's it? Awesome. Awesome. Love it. Now, you're probably not going to be able to do your own owner-occupied large real estate doing it that way, but you can go out and buy others. I don't know how much you ever have looked into leases, but there are these things called absolute triple net leases that you have no obligations over these buildings, or almost no obligation over. I mean to tell you, not a financial planner, but at the same time, it is, again, mailbox money. So you can just crank out an extremely profitable practice, take that money, and then go buy real estate that way. If you haven't figured out, I love real estate. Real estate's cool. 401ks are not cool. They just aren't. They go up and down so much. I would much rather know and be able to concentrate and know that I have met my monthly, yearly spending needs, and that I've got that locked in, and you've got that when you've got real estate. It's a steady stream of income, no surprises, maybe not the true upsides you'll find, not the roller coaster you can go on with Bitcoin, and that's a whole nother podcast all by itself. We could talk about Bitcoin all day long, but that's one of the things you need to be thinking about. What number do I need to achieve so I can just walk away from all of this? And so that's its own podcast, is coming up with your freedom number. But the long-term thinking about what you want to do. What is it that you want to do? Is it spending time with your family? Is it messing around on the golf course? I don't care what it is. I just want you to know what it is. What does the practice look like? Are we running 1 or 2 chairs, doing specialty procedures all the time? Great. Are we running no chairs and you have associates doing that work for you? Great. Do you build a big old building? Do you buy multiple smaller practices because you think that'll be easier to manage? which there are things that are easier to manage about it than having one big building. But one of my favorite solutions is sayings is every solution presents its own problems. And so there are drawbacks to each and every one of those, but there's also positives to each one as well. So I don't care which one you do. I've had multiple practices. I've had one large building. I've had a small building that we worked out of 2 chairs, and I did just specialty procedures out of it. And they all have awesome things about it. They all have awesome things about it, and they all have things that make you maybe yearn for more or wish something was different, for sure. But I need you to sit down and do an exercise at some point with yourself. It can simply be driving to work, but you need to be thinking, what do I want my personal life to look like? Financially, that is. What do I want it to look like? Do I feel like I need to achieve some giant nest egg in order to get what I want to get? Or are we going to listen to me and say, well, let's go out and get some real estate, and I'm going to figure out my monthly, yearly cash flow and just buy property so that I know that cash flow is coming in? Are you going to rely on a big building? What does that all look like to you? So you need to determine personally and financially what that looks like, but you also need to decide what that looks like professionally as well. How much are you working? 0 days, 1 day, all the days? You get to decide. I am not going to dictate to you what kind of practice you should have, because again, they all have drawbacks to them. But you need to be able to express and articulate and be able to write down what that is, because that comes in the form of looking at what is a 1-year goal for you? What is a 3-year goal for you? What's a 10-year goal for you? What's a 20-year goal look like for you? I'm not holding the handpiece in 20 years. I know that much. I'm not holding the handpiece much anymore as it is, except for select clients. So that's just more out of a courtesy to them. They've been with me from the very start, so I will help them out. And they're the ones that help set me on my way. And I like them, and I don't work with people that I don't like. But you need to decide for yourself, what does that look like? How long do you want to be at the chair? So you need to decide that for yourself, and you need to be thinking about how long will it take you to get to the point of being able to do that. Now, my job is to speed that all up for you, is to compress time. Because as I've said in some of my other episodes, you can absolutely buy time. As we've mentioned, there's things you can delegate to other people to do in order to compress your time. Anything from having someone take care of your dry cleaning for you, taking care of your lawn, taking care of your pool, going and getting gas for you. Whatever it is, there are ways to get time back. And my job is to compress the time it takes to get you to your freedom number. But you need to decide what that all looks like so that I can help you steer to get to that point. So we both have 2 different jobs. I'm going to help you get there, but your job is to decide where there is. But you need to be thinking long term. There are even little things that I have thought about. I have certain sayings that I say to my daughter now and to my son now that I think about when I'm actually, I have them for now in certain moments, and I also have them planned literally for her wedding. It's just a long, drawn out plan, and she's 8, so she ain't getting married anytime soon. She better not. But it's a long, drawn out plan, and some of you may think that's crazy, but I like to be in control of my future as much as possible. I like to make major events as special as possible. And I like to have them grounded in a connection back to me as much as I possibly can. And I think she's going to think it's great. And it's going to make some of the things she kind of questions now will make a whole lot more sense as she goes through life. But that happens for all your kids. It happens for everybody. They get a little bit more clarity about what people were saying to them. But those are things that I have orchestrated throughout their lives so that those moments have a little bit more meaning when they come to that, when they get married, when they graduate from high school, college, get their driver's license, have their first legal drink. All of those things I tried to plan out as much as I possibly can. And you can call me a control freak, and you may be right. I do like to have a control of a lot of things that I do, but I'm also very good at delegating. I'm very, very good at delegating because I don't want to do the things that I don't want to do. But I do like to have control over the things that I like to do. But the point is you're supposed to be thinking long-term about all these things. Have any of you thought about your kid's wedding aside from how am I going to pay for it? Have you thought about where it might be? And ultimately, that's their choice, obviously. But some of these things, you get set up. Do you have it at a place that you have a family vacation that you go to, the lake house? You go up to the same lake every single year. We go over to a beach over in a place called Seaside over in the Panhandle of Florida, which, if you didn't know, the Panhandle of Florida has some of the most beautiful beaches in the entire world. And currently it's out in the middle of nowhere, but it has definitely been found, and more and more people are going there every single year. But the beaches are amazing, the water's amazing, and that water gets really, really hot in the summer because that Gulf of Mexico gets really warm. But we go there at least once a year, and we've got special spots. And so I say to myself, well, that could be a special spot where they could actually get married someday. But it needs to be long-term planning that you're thinking about. So you can be thinking about, do you live where you want to be long-term? Is it a reality for you? Is that somewhere that you want to be? I've got all my friends within a golf cart ride for me right now. And that is actually something we have talked about, this fact of, hey man, why would I move anywhere else? I live somewhere warm. That was something else that I planned on. I knew I was going to move to Florida when I retired, and I said, well, screw that. I'm going before that I even set up all my practice and get my life started. So we went where it was warm from the get-go because I hate being cold. Drives me nuts. So we went somewhere warm. Well, now we have friends within a little golf cart. We live all within about 8 to 10 houses of each other. And we have already talked, and life changes, that we will be staying in these houses so that we can be near our friends. And it's awesome. It's great. They're all my closest friends in the world, all live about 8 to 10 houses away from me, and we can just hop on a golf cart and go see them anytime that we want. It's cool. But have you designed that? Have you started to design the future of where you're going to be once you retire? Because I'll tell you, real estate ain't going to get any cheaper. You may think about going and buying that house now. How cool would that be? I mean, we've seen prices pretty much double, at least here in Florida and a lot of other parts of the country, have doubled since the pandemic. It's insane. It is insane. And soon what's going to happen is the Fed's talking about cutting rates, and there's an outside chance they might actually raise the rates here really soon. But they're talking about potentially cutting rates 6 times in 2024, and you will see an absolute mad dash for people who have been sitting on the sidelines either to invest in a home or to move because they haven't been able to, because they can't fathom the idea of going from a sub 3% interest rate over to a 7% interest rate. And you are going to see these houses, price of these houses, they've kind of dipped around 20% in the last, 6 months, 8 months, year. You are about to see them shoot right back up. And at some point in time, there will be another correction. But the line just goes up. It goes up. And parts of it along the way may go down, but it's just going to go up. So have you thought about where you want to live? Have you thought about who you want to live near? Do you have family? Your sister, brother, something like that, live somewhere else. Or maybe they live near you now and you want to get the hell away from them and you want to move far, far away from them. What kind of planning? What does that look like? Do you want to live at the beach? I mean, that it would be a great time to buy a house now, right? It's the cheapest it's ever going to be, so you might as well do it now if you want to live out at the beach and then just rent it out. Rent it out for now. You can go and fix all that stuff. Those renters are going to tear your house apart, but they're going to pay for your mortgage in the meantime. And then when you move in, just put in all the little fixtures that you want to put in there. Paint the walls whatever color you're going to need to. Fix all those holes that they're going to slam into your walls while you're renting it out. Just know that it's going to happen, and that's fine. But they're the ones that are going to pay your rent. All of a sudden, you've got a house rent-free or mortgage-free by the time you actually move in. You want to live in the mountains? Go get a mountain house. Do the same thing. Rent it out. So think about those little steps. Where do you want to live? Who do you want to live by? What activities do you want to have? You want to make sure that you want to get your pilot's license? That's cool. I've been thinking about doing that. I really think I got a buddy who flies. One of the guys that lives near me, he flies, and I keep thinking, I'm just like, I should probably do that because it's cool. So we go up in his plane. He flies us around. We'll go up to a different beach and have lunch times. It's cool. But you got to live kind of near an airport. You don't want to be a pain in the ass. But they're all over the place. These small airports are all over the place. You can get to one real easily. But just make sure wherever you're looking at that, you're thinking about that. Do you want to teach at a dental school? Give back. Well, you got to live fairly close to a dental school. I've thought about doing that. I love teaching. That's why I'm talking to you guys. There's a lot of things I've learned over the years because I've screwed up a lot over the years. But fortunately, I learned from my mistakes. So now I'm ready to teach all those things. And I'd love to teach over at UF. Getting over to Gainesville is a pain in the ass from my house, though, unfortunately. So maybe someday they'll build an expressway. The time for me to be completely done and go teach over there. But thinking about what your hobbies that you want to have on top of where you want to live, on top of who you want to live by. Are you going to want to be living near your kids? Do you want to have a condo or a house near your kids so you can spend time with them and see the grandkids? If you had told me as a teenager that I would want to live near my parents, I would have told you were crazy. Now it just makes my life easier to live near my parents. Makes my life easier. Fortunately, they know not to just drop in, but at the same time, they're able to babysit my kids. I'm able to go and check in on them. My mom's getting older. She can barely walk at this point in time. So I got to go check in on her. And it makes my life much easier knowing that I can go and do those things, or my wife can go and do those things, and not make it something that's a chore all of a sudden. It's going to spend a time with her, make sure she's doing all right. But these are all things you need to be thinking about. So map out an ideal life for yourself. Personally, professionally, which I haven't harped on too much, but again, there's only so many different ways you can do it. You working none, you working a little bit, working in a small office, working in a big office, or having a bunch of offices. So there's not too much to map out in there, but you should be at least clear of where you want to be, because that's going to take overall more than a decade, probably 2 decades for you to get to where you want to be start to finish. Depending on what you want to do, depending on how big you want to blow this thing up by the time you've got your freedom. So it changes, it varies, it depends. So, but make sure you map that out. Make sure you have a pretty good idea and you have actually written this down on paper. It's so corny. It is so corny. And I'm not necessarily talking about making a dream board. You don't have to go cut out pictures and start pasting that crap on there. But you should have a fairly clear description: who, what, where, when. Put a deadline on it. Put a deadline on it. My job will then be to come back around and make that happen sooner. But I want you to put a deadline on it for now. But be as clear and specific as you can of what it is that we're going to try to achieve. And I will do everything in my power to help you achieve all of that, but compress the time it takes you to get there. So I'm going to stop there on that. I'm going to let you do that homework, and then we're going to do another podcast talking primarily about the idea of longevity, of actually living that out. And not just living that out, but actually being able to enjoy it. So one of the concepts we'll talk about is not just lifespan, but health span. Of how you can actually be vibrant, awake, aware, walking. I just talked about my mom not really being able to walk. Man, I mean, that's a problem. We want you to be able to walk and enjoy these things and the fruits of all your hard labor and mapping out of your future. But overall, I would encourage you to think about increasing the overall time you're thinking about what you're trying to do. So many of you are just trying to think about getting through that one crown prep right at that moment, getting through this one problem with this one staff member that you've got right at the moment. And you're not thinking about where you're actually trying to go. And if you never think about these things, you will never, ever get there. You're never going to get there. But I can help you get there if you articulate what it is that you are actually trying to accomplish, and I will get you there, and I will get you there faster than you could have ever possibly imagined. I promise you that. All right? So write that all down. That's your homework. Get that done, and then we'll follow up with this. I'm actually talking about being healthy enough to enjoy all of the stuff that you're going to be able to accomplish. All right? Thank you so much for tuning in. I'd encourage you to download our Forging Your Freedom ebook. That is at thetitaniumpractice.com. And as always, I am dedicated to your freedom. Have an awesome day. Thanks for listening. Bye.
You've been listening to the Titanium Practice Podcast with your host, Dr. Stephen Freeman. Please hit the like and subscribe button and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Titanium Practice. Questions or comments? Send an email to info@titaniumpractice.com. Join us next time to help turn your average practice into a titanium practice.